Mary stayed outside the tomb and cried. She was still very sad because she didn't know where Jesus was. She turned around and saw someone standing there. She didn't realize it was Jesus. She thought he was the man who took care of the garden. The man looked at her and said one word, Mary. As soon as he said her name, Mary knew exactly who he was. She was so happy that she cried out, Teacher! Jesus told her not to hold on to him yet. He asked her to go and find his friends to tell them that he was going back to his Father in heaven. Mary didn't waste any time. She ran through the city streets as fast as she could because she had the most amazing news to share. Meanwhile, the guards who had fainted at the tomb went to the high priest. They were shaking with fear as they told him about the angel and the earthquake. The religious leaders met together. They were very upset and afraid because they knew if people found out Jesus was alive, their plan would be ruined. They decided to pay the guards a lot of money. They told the guards to lie and say that Jesus' friends had come in the night and stolen his body while they were sleeping. Mary found the disciples and told them everything. I have seen the Lord, she shouted. But most of them were still too confused and scared to believe her. Mary looked back at the garden one last time before she left. She was so happy because she knew the truth. Her teacher was alive. Other women also came to the garden that morning. They were bringing spices to take care of Jesus' body, but they didn't know the stone had been moved yet. When they reached the tomb, they saw a bright angel sitting on the big stone. They were very surprised and a little bit scared. The angel told them not to be afraid. He said, I know you are looking for Jesus, but he is not here. He has come back to life just like he said he would. The women ran to tell the others, and suddenly Jesus appeared right in front of them. They were so happy that they fell down and worshipped him. While this was happening, the guards who had been at the tomb were heading into the city. They were tired and confused after everything they had seen. They went straight to the high priest and told him exactly what happened. They described the angel and how the big stone had moved all by itself. The high priest didn't want anyone to know the truth. He called the other leaders together to make a secret plan to hide what had happened. They decided to give the guards a huge amount of money. They told them to say that Jesus' friends had stolen the body while the guards were sleeping. The guards took the money and did exactly what the leaders said. They went around telling people a lie so that no one would know that the king had really risen. Later that same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were walking to a village called Emmaus. They were talking about everything that had happened in the city, and they felt very sad. They couldn't understand why Jesus had to die. They had hoped he would be the one to save their people, and now they felt like all their hope was gone. While they were talking, Jesus himself came up and started walking right next to them. But for some reason, God kept them from recognizing who he was. Jesus asked them, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" The 2 men stopped walking and looked at him with very sad faces. One of them, named Cleopas, asked, "Are you the only person in Jerusalem who doesn't know what has been happening lately?" They told him all about Jesus of Nazareth. They said he was a great prophet, but the leaders had him killed. They even mentioned that some women had found his tomb empty that morning. Then Jesus began to explain the Bible to them. He showed them that for thousands of years, the prophets had said the king would have to suffer before he entered his glory. As they got close to the village, Jesus acted like he was going to keep going, but the men begged him to stay with them because it was getting late and the sun was going down. Jesus agreed to stay, and they all sat down for dinner. The room was quiet and warm, lit by the soft glow of the lamps. At the table, Jesus took the bread, gave thanks to God, and broke it. Suddenly, it was like their eyes were opened, and they realized it was Jesus. But the very moment they recognized him, Jesus disappeared. He was gone from the table, leaving the 2 men standing there in total shock. They looked at each other and said, "Didn't our hearts feel like they were on fire when he was talking to us and explaining the Bible?" They were so happy they couldn't stay still. Even though it was late at night, they didn't wait until morning. They jumped up and ran out of the house to go back to Jerusalem. They ran all the way back, covering the same miles they had just walked. They didn't feel tired at all because they had such big news to tell the others. They finally reached the house in Jerusalem. They hurried up the stairs to the upper room where they knew the rest of the group would be hiding. Inside, the disciples were hiding behind locked doors. They were still very afraid that the leaders who had arrested Jesus would come for them next. The 2 men told the disciples everything that had happened on the road. They explained how they had seen Jesus and how they finally recognized him at dinner. Suddenly, while they were still talking, Jesus appeared right in the middle of the room. He didn't even use the door. He just stood there and said, "Peace be with you." The disciples were terrified. They thought they were seeing a ghost and were too scared to move. Jesus looked at them and asked why they were so afraid. He showed them his hands and his feet so they could see the marks and know for sure that it was really him. One of the disciples, named Thomas, wasn't in the room when Jesus came the first time. When he finally came back, the others were so excited to tell him what happened. The other disciples kept telling him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas wouldn't believe them. He told them he wouldn't believe it unless he could see the nail marks in Jesus' hands and touch them with his own fingers. 8 days later, the disciples were all together in the same house again. This time, Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked tight, they all felt like something amazing was about to happen. Suddenly, Jesus appeared right in the middle of the room again. Just like before, he looked at them and said, "Peace be with you." Then Jesus turned and looked directly at Thomas. He knew exactly what Thomas had said a week ago, even though he wasn't there to hear it. Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas was so amazed that he fell to his knees. He didn't even need to touch the marks anymore. He looked up at Jesus and said, "My Lord and my God." Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus stayed with the disciples for a while. He did many other amazing things that showed them he was the Son of God, and they were all so happy to have their friend back. After this, the disciples decided to leave Jerusalem. They began the long walk back to the Sea of Galilee, where they used to work together as fishermen. After a long walk, the disciples finally made it back to the Sea of Galilee. The water was blue and calm, and everything looked just like it did before they left. Simon Peter looked out at the water and said, "I'm going fishing." The other 6 disciples who were with him said, "We'll come with you." They pushed the boat out into the deep water. They worked hard all through the night, throwing their heavy nets again and again, but they didn't catch a single fish. Early the next morning, as the sun was just starting to come up, someone was standing on the shore. The disciples saw him, but they didn't know it was Jesus. Jesus called out to them from the beach and asked, "Friends, haven't you caught any fish?" They shouted back across the water, "No." Jesus told them, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." The disciples decided to try it one more time. As soon as they threw the net out, it filled up with so many fish that they weren't strong enough to pull it back into the boat. John looked at the beach and whispered to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Peter heard that, he jumped right into the water and started swimming to the shore. When Peter got to the beach, he saw a small fire with fish and bread already cooking on it. Jesus was waiting for them with breakfast ready. The other disciples brought the boat in, dragging the net full of fish. Jesus looked at them all and said, "Come and have breakfast." When they finished eating breakfast, everyone was quiet and full. They sat together on the warm stones, enjoying the morning sun and the sound of the water. Jesus turned to Peter. Even though they were having a nice morning, Peter was still thinking about how he had let Jesus down before. Jesus asked him, "Simon, do you love me more than these?" Peter looked at him and said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus told him, "Then feed my lambs." He was telling Peter that he wanted him to take care of his followers like a shepherd takes care of little sheep. A moment later, Jesus asked the same thing again. "Simon, do you love me?" Peter answered again, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus told him, "Take care of my sheep." When Jesus asked him a third time, Peter felt very sad. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus told him for the third time, "Feed my sheep." He wanted Peter to know that he was completely forgiven and that he had a very important mission to lead the others. As they started walking along the shore, Peter saw John following them. He asked Jesus what would happen to John in the future. Jesus told Peter not to worry about anyone else. He said, "If I want him to stay until I come back, what is that to you? You must follow me." A little while later, Jesus met all of his disciples on a high mountain in Galilee. This was the place where he was going to give them their final instructions before going back to heaven. When the disciples saw Jesus standing on the mountain, they fell to their knees and worshipped him. Even though some of them still felt a little confused, they knew he was truly their king. Jesus walked up to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." He wanted them to know that he has the power to protect them no matter where they go. Then he gave them a very important job. He said, "Go and make disciples of all nations. Baptize them and teach them to obey everything I have commanded you." Jesus promised them that they wouldn't have to do this alone. He said, "And remember, I am with you always to the very end of the age." A few weeks later, Jesus led his friends back to Jerusalem. They walked up to the top of the Mount of Olives, the same place where they had spent so much time together before. They stood together on the hill, looking out over the city. Jesus was giving them his very last instructions and telling them to wait in Jerusalem for a special gift from God. While he was blessing them, something incredible started to happen. The disciples watched as Jesus began to move, but he wasn't walking, he was being lifted up. Slowly and gracefully, Jesus rose higher and higher into the air. The disciples stood perfectly still, their eyes wide as they watched their king going back to his home in heaven. They kept looking up until a bright, shining cloud covered him, and they couldn't see him anymore. He was gone, but they didn't feel sad. They felt full of hope. While they were still staring at the sky, two men in glowing white clothes suddenly appeared next to them. They were angels sent to give the disciples one last message. The angels asked the disciples why they were still looking at the sky. They told them that Jesus had gone to heaven, but that he would come back again one day in the very same way. The disciples went back to Jerusalem, just like Jesus told them to. They weren't sad or afraid anymore. They were full of joy because they knew their king was alive and in charge of everything. They stayed in the upper room and spent their time praying together. They were waiting for the special gift Jesus had promised them, and they were ready to start the mission he gave them. This was just the beginning of a whole new story. The disciples were ready to go to every nation and tell everyone the good news about Jesus, the King of Glory. Jesus is the King who gave his life for us, but he is also the King who rose again to give us a new life. He is the King of Glory, and his kingdom will never end. Don't miss the next part of the story. Subscribe to our channel and join us as we explore more incredible journeys from the Bible. What was your favorite part of the story? Let us know in the comments below and hit the like button if you were moved by the King's victory. Help us spread the message of the King of Glory. Share this video with your friends and family so they can hear the good news too. We are so glad you joined us for this journey. Remember that the same power that raised the King is with you today. Until next time, remember, you are seen, you are loved, and your story is held in the faithful hands of God. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next story.